Hello everybody, I'm Raphael Perry and it's time for some more Lone Wolf. We're starting book 9, the Cauldron of Fear, and this will be the final book in the series that I will not be playing blind. Because for some obscure reason many years ago, I never played past book 9. So this will be the last book, and now, in all fairness, I last played this book about, 25, 30 years ago, so I don't necessarily remember very much. I remember quite a few of the pictures, because they're quite memorable. They're not Gary Chalk's artwork, we have a new artist. As you can see from the map is done in a very new style. I am not as fond of these new maps in this book and future books. Because here's the thing, with the possible exception of the map of Dessi, where it can be a bit difficult to read, each of the earlier maps in the series look like a map that Lone Wolf would actually possess and carry around with him. They look like a map that would be created within the world of Magnamund by some of its natives for some of its natives to consult and look at. Whereas these later maps look like they were created by someone outside the world, right? They feel detached. They don't have the little characterful touches. We still have the heraldry around the edge of the maps. But then here we have the Ogrons. There's something about the way the mountains or the cities are drawn, the way the letters are placed. Like that's a bit of a sloping slant, for example. So is this. Here, it's all very much straight lines. The colours seem... We have a key down here for specific colours, like, plains, desert, and so on. And they almost look like they were done with a computer, the way these forests are very... I mean, they're not entirely straight lines of trees or anything, but it's like someone's gone with a brush and just gone blip, like that or something, Additionally, this map doesn't quite match up. The scale is ever so slightly different. So this is 150 miles. Down here, this is 100. But this, if I go broop, we go broop, appears to be at a slightly different scale. Over here, that's 100, that's 150, so we go broop, broop. I mean, I'm not doing it exactly, but it does feel like this one is zoomed in ever so slightly. Let's put it another way. Here we have Casiorn, and here Cauldron. Cauldron corresponds to Cauldron over here, and we have Suentina over here and Suentina down here. So here we have the Char Mountains, and there's presumably this connects up to the end of the Char Mountains over there. The Anari Pass could arguably, or the Golden Trail, could arguably connect up with Chadan. Let's see. Suentina, Casiorn, Cauldron, Casiorn. In theory, this road from Casiorn connects down to Ostov. Which would then suggest this road from Ressa doesn't seem to connect to anything. That's the road to Ressa, and the gold trail then comes up here to Chada, right? Then this road coming down here through the Chadan Pass emerges at the Anari Pass somehow and comes to Zila. Except it would also make sense if that connects here to Bidar, the southern Char range here. No. So if that road from Bidar comes up here, where the hell does these two roads go? Do they connect up to here somehow? Is there another mountain pass? And here we have the Kakush uplands, which obviously are like up here from Kakush somewhere. We have Bhutan, which is Bhutan down here. The details on this edge of the map do not seem to align as well, especially the lack of desert here, for example. These do not seem to align as well with the existing maps on this side as they do with the north and west, for example. But it just feels like a kind of out-of-character map, very immersion-breaking, whereas these are very in-character maps. Here we have these beautiful compass roses, for example. This one in the style of Vassagonia. You know, this looks more like, let's say, some lending compass rose, maybe. Although this, definitely. So we get, you know, a distinct feel. This is the compass rose used by the ship's captain heading across the sea to Kalt, you know. We technically have one here on the map of the Stormlands. We don't even get one on the Danarg Swamp. This, for some reason, the points almost venturing outside the circle of diagonals, but not quite. It feels a bit too contained, a bit too restrained, a bit too polite. So what do I remember of this book? I remember the siege of the city. I think it's the city of Tahou, where we're going to get the next Doomstone, or Lorestone. Doomstones is a Warhammer Fantasy roleplay campaign, isn't it? So I remember the siege of the city. I remember the evil warlord striding in through the city gates at the end of the siege ahead of his army like a conquering hero, and that he could be very easily defeated with a single item. I can't remember offhand exactly what that item was. But it's an item gained within this book, not an item brought in from a previous book that puts it on easy mode. I do recall being informed by viewers that I don't get an option to use that item if I have the Summer Sword, as it activates immediately and I must fight him. I'm not sure I ever played this book with the Summer Sword. I might have played it with it once, years ago. Most of my memories of playing this book are from before I actually had a copy of Book 2. My first book was Book 3, then Book 8, then Book 9, then I was able to get hold of Book 1, and Books 4 and 5. Eventually I was then able to get hold of Book 2, and Book 6 and 7. You know, it was like crazy stuff, right? I might have got hold of Book 7 before Book 2 even, you know, so I did not get hold of Book 2 for a long time. So being aware that the Evil World at the end is a very difficult fight, I haven't looked at the exact numbers, and that we can cheesy one-shot him with some magic item we discover in the ruins underneath the city, I think it may be the time to honour the old experience of playing this book without the magic sword, which trivialises combat, especially as our healing and curing abilities essentially trivialise combat damage anyway, so we could stand to get a bit more hurt in fights as it is. I remember that towards the end of the book it was possible to be slain by a boulder hurled from some kind of catapult outside the city walls. I think it was a random dice roll. It was just roll or die. It could kill you, it could knock you off the wall, and you could be hanging on to some piece of broken scaffolding or something inside the castle, with a chance to die then. It might have just been a roll or die moment. It might have felt that extreme, but there may have been a warning to not go up on the wall. I can't remember. Very long time ago. I remember the picture of the ghoul seated over us with a sword as we sleep, about to slay us. And in that picture, Lone Wolf has a hand, and legs, and a waist, and feet, and appears to be reaching for a sword. So canonically, I think we might want to take a sword with us into this book. I remember the picture of the winged serpent. I recall that all the city guards are very identikit. They don't only have the same armour and swords, they have almost identical faces. And that all the Gyaks in the book have identical armour and faces, almost identical weapons, whereas the Gyaks in the previous books embraced the whole orc and goblin random craziness, whereas here they just look like bog standard orc model, serial rank number, cloned. I bought 50 of the same one, there we go, you know. The Drakarim in this book, whose artwork, I believe, was actually in the Lone Wolf newsletter adverts in the back of book 3 when I bought it, right? A bunch of Drakarim storming through a gate. They do look a bit similar as well, with their skull helms and their armour, so they look a bit more like soldiers than they did previously. Before, they were very much the whole unique Chaos Warrior thing, especially in book 4 or 5, book 5 I think. So they become more standardized as well, but nowhere near as much as the Gyaks or the city guards, I think, of Tahou. What else? I think this book, or one of the previous two, books 7 or 8, and this one, begins the tradition of any horse that Lone Wolf rides having a very short life expectancy. In the community, there's a bit of a joke that, you know, every horse he rides dies while he's riding it or something. Not so much earlier on, but it does seem to become a bit of a running pattern. I remember lizard men in the ruins under the city. Possibly, I think the lizard men have a sort of magic meeting, and they appear to have a sort of rocket launcher made of crystals, which fires, I think, like laser beam or fire beam, essentially. Sort of concentrated flame rather than a gout of, you know, crazy chaotic natural flame. I think it might be some crystal component from the ruins we used to defeat the evil Darklord when he comes in with his magical orb of power, like a crystal ball in his hands. I wouldn't have thought of Mystic Meg at the time because she wasn't around until a few years after I got hold of this book. Oh, and I remember that in this book we get asked if we have Barnadon's crystal star. Why is all this selected? Because I copied it to the backup sheet from book 7 to make it the backup sheet from book 8. We get to meet Barnadon and I think one of the main magicians of Dessi again. And Barnadon looks extremely happy to see us and more feminine than usual. There's something about the way his facial features are drawn this time that makes him look like a girl. It's not the hair, honest. It's the face and the facial expression of sheer joy at seeing us for the first time since, I think, book 4. I can't... Or 5. No, it was book 5, wasn't it? Yeah. I can't remember in book 5 if we were asked if we had the crystal star pendant, which would have been useful in book 2 if we'd been poisoned to cut open our vein and let the poison come out with the points of the star. What else? well. Also, if we leave the Summer Sword behind... Oh! And this book has a really good do you want to use the Dagger of Vashna moment. So taking that with us would be good. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's a, oh, hey, that item you haven't used in ages moment. Like, did you bring it with you this time, or did you just dump it in the Kai Monastery for books, hoping it'd be safe and that no one would ever come take it from there ever again? I don't think anyone ever does go and steal things from the Kai Monastery, not that I know of, but then again, my knowledge ends at the end of this book. I do have physical copies of books 10 to 12, classic editions, the Beaver Books covers, that I was able to get second hand. I must have opened them and flipped through them at some point, but I have not played them. I have the Magnamund Mega Deal physical editions up to about book 18, where they stopped, essentially. On the bookshelf upstairs, partially as a reminder to never deal with Mongoose Publishing ever again. Oh, that was painful, that was. Paid for 40 books, got 20. Yeah. Including so many misprints and reprints on those 20. I got 4 copies of book 3, essentially. I was able to give one of them away to a friend and just tell him to write in the missing one sentence section that was covered up by a piece of filler art. Was it book 3 only got 3? It was book 3 or 4 got 4 print runs, essentially. And the maps in the Mongoose editions were like this, but really dark. So you couldn't read them very clearly. It was a shame, because they could have been quite nice maps. Additionally, of course, in the Mongoose stuff, the Gaiaks and Drakarim become much more homogenized, even more than the illustrations in this one. The Gaiak illustrations clearly being affected by AD&D 3rd edition depictions of orcs at the time. And the other problem is that the artwork in the Mongoose editions suffers heavily from whoever hired the artist or the artists being obsessed with the idea that it should look like a black and white 1950s comic book for people in the military. So there's lots of squaddy squarehead haircuts and stupid shit that doesn't look right for Magnamund at all. You know, it's bad. It's bad art. The covers are good. And then, who was it? Cubicle 7 did a really good Lone Wolf role-playing game. Actually, hang on. Oh, is it going to be in the Kickstarters folder or just the Lone Wolf folder? I think it's going to be in the Kickstarters folder. Actually, let's... Darklords. This was a... Yeah, this was a Mongoose one. Yeah, good cover. Interior art, not so good at all. Just previews? Wow. Hang on, where are we? Let's see if I can find some... Okay. Cover's a bit bland. Let's try to find some pictures. We've got a map. Another map. Not very many pictures, mind you. Picture. No, it's a map. More maps. Looks like we get no pictures in this one. Okay. Oh, cool rulebook then. So again, you know, pretty decent cover. Possibly a bit low effort, but light shade, things in the foreground, background, beautiful wintry sky. Let's find some of these terrible pictures. What the fuck is that helmet? It's like an American football player helmet or motorbike rider's crash helmet. The visor is a bit too much of a bubble, which makes it look like science fiction. The rifle or musket for the gunner of bore is ridiculously large. These do seem to be... That's almost the pose from the miniature they produced. Ridiculous, giant, comedy, over-the-top, taking the piss, two-handed hammer of bullshit for someone on drugs. It's stupid. Something interesting we did get from this game, however, is that the Brotherhood of the Crystal Star does possess a healing spell, but it can only be cast while the spellcaster is standing at least knee-deep in a river or stream and touching the target. So it's not like they can just heal anyone and everywhere. So here we have some dwarfs, a couple of Gyaks getting gun-butted and blown away. It was blatantly 3rd edition without the combat maneuvers, which simplified things a bit. And with some other things, some very modern haircuts for Kai monks in training. What's this? A magician of Dessi? Okay, what's that supposed to be? A Gorgaz? Some kind of pirate or musketeer. That hair might be a little extreme for the motion, as he's being flung back. Or he or she, it's a bit hard to tell actually of that chest. They'd have to have started like right here to go back that far that fast. What else? It looks a bit like a samurai or sumo teacher. These hairstyles not quite so bad. Okay, over there a little bit too modern. Knights of Sommerland, okay, got it. I don't know. The lack of shading makes this look too far forwards because the lines are thicker. This look too far back. This look too far back. It's all over the place for perspective on that picture. Okay, Angry Lady of Spirit. Oh, that's Amazon of Telkos. The Telkoi, aren't they supposed to be like black essentially? At least they are in all the other pictures they did for them. Well, you know, sort of African desert people. I don't know what's going on with that weird face mask. It looks a bit too... Yeah, it wouldn't look out of place in the way of a tiger, but... And Magnamund is a very multicultural place. There's something a bit weird about this, however. I think this is the same guy, one of the same guys who did a lot of their paranoia artwork. Someone likes Mission Impossible stuff, obviously. These pavises are rubbish if that many arrows have just punched straight through them. But they do feel a bit Book 9 of Lone Wolf, maybe, so we can forgive that a bit. This also feels very mongoose, this art. People cowering behind pavises. I'm thinking particularly of one book they put up. Looks like the Dwarfs of Bor have a cannon. Gyak's running away from it now that it's been revealed. And from what we've seen, well, we didn't get to see it in book 7 or 8. I think it's book 8. There's a an inn ran by a dwarf and his son who try to rob you. But the dwarves do very much seem to like gotcha moments where they pull out a gun and shoot you. Like that dwarf in the mine, you know, he throws a pickaxe, picks up his gun, fires it. On the Sky Rider, when in book 5, when the Gaiacs or Dracarim are dropping down, and a dwarf who's hiding in a little porthole or hatch takes the first shot, the dwarfs do seem to like to unleash their big bang as a sneak attack rather than sort of proudly presenting it. So this thing emerging suddenly, it feels like they've beaten down a door and behind it is this waiting for them. It's been manoeuvred into position, so they've had time, you know, they would have had time to run away long before it got to this stage of readiness. So it seems as if the Gaiacs have only just become aware of what this thing is. Unless this second dwarf has shouted a warning, or they can now see the fire of him lighting the fuse. So it feels like an ambush technique. Not a lot going on in this picture. A couple of people are scared as something comes up through a hatch. I'm trying to get to the monster pictures. Dear God, that is pure cartoon bullshit. Marvel superheroes, crop top, whatever fucking drugs this dickhead was on at the time sort of thing. And it is just more of that kind of stuff constantly throughout. That's impressive. I think that's like a Helghast or Vordak or some kind of evil sorcerer. Looks like he's wearing the kind of armor that a He-Man villain might wear, just blasting this person back with a bolt of flaming energy. This person clearly exhausted, worn down, maybe wounded as well, but not bleeding, mind you. And that arm just stops behind this tree trunk. There's no, you know, it's like, okay, let's see. Armpit, this may be elbow. There's no hand. Maybe the hand's on the back of it. If that is the elbow, it makes sense. If the elbow's up here and the arm's going this way to match the length of that, with perspective, he could be leaning on it. But it's just a really weird artistic composition as far as the arm goes. Everything else is kind of okay. Another very modern hairstyle for Magnamund. Person dodging, person chasing. Great big blocks coming down to crush. But this person seems to be avoiding the chaser, not the blocks. This feels a bit like some of the artwork that Green Ronin did for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition, not for the core rulebook, but for some of the adventures, where they reimagined the classic Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay illustrations as more sort of dragon punk, which is basically the 3.0, 3.5 style, where all of the characters look like young Americans trying to look hard, instead of young modern Americans trying to look hard, as opposed to hard characters looking hard without trying. This one's not so bad. This one's kind of okay-ish. Bit of a weird, like he's leaning forwards, but he's leaning forwards to support the weight of the stack of books with his belly, but the legs don't support that. The legs are back because he's stepping forwards. He's in motion. He's not standing still, although he appears very static in the image. Come on, somewhere down here there's some more monster fighting pictures. Shooting straight through the wing, dragons fighting each other, very violent and aggressive. Some kind of knight on the... this knight holding the sword, we got a timeline here. I think this is the King of Magnamund defeating Vashna and casting him down into the abyss. That looks like a statue of a dwarf, or a dwarf himself beating these pillars for some reason, not because there's nothing on these platforms. That looks very much like a modern suspension bridge or something. Looks the crisscross especially. Doesn't quite feel right. Then again, the Darklords should feel evil and alien in the way they affect the world. That looks too modern. It looks like something from a science fiction game. It just has that vibe. The shape is too regular and not organic enough. I think that's supposed to be a Drakarim whipping a prisoner, but he's got no armor on at the moment. But the way the Drakarim skull masks are depicted in this game, in the Mongoose version, is very different. And it looks absolute rubbish. I'm going to see if I can try and find some of them. We've got a big crater. Not sure why this picture is here apart from to take up space. Some kind of undead, probably a Vordak or something. A very cartoony Gorgaz. Crypt Spawn, okay. So Doomwolf. So Drakarim shouldn't be far off. Gaiax. So Drakarim, no picture here. Helghast obviously reminds us of Hel from Norse mythology. She's a taker, she doesn't give. But this doesn't feel like the way a Helghast's disguise should melt. It's just sort of like seeing through the disguise down this half and not on the other side, weirdly. That's either a land beast or the other kind of thing that gets ridden. More orky style Gaiax. Those are Vordaks. They look very identical clone almost. This one's leaning to the side a bit. Okay, one of these. I'm aware I'm sidetracked, okay. But I'm enjoying it. Was it this one? One of these had enough Drakarim pictures for us to know that they were, what the fuck is this? You know, this is silly. Looks like big smiley face, but this is the torture victim, not the torturer. Which makes it more ominous, I suppose. But again, very shortish modern haircut. You can see the edge of it there. It doesn't really sort of flow down here a bit. And it could be hanging down. This could be seen from above. But again, it doesn't feel right. Somehow. Don't know what this is. This is some kind of Ogron or Drakarim. It looks a bit too small for an Ogron, but they're just sort of featureless. And lacking identity. Okay, we got a couple of characters here. Ugh. These pictures, I mean, nice details, but doesn't necessarily evoke much of a feeling, a vibe for a scene. Does it give you a feeling of what the place is like, or does it just show you something in a sort of cold, indifferent manner? And should you really be breathing fire like that with the extra hand when the magic of Magnamund tends overall to be more of the subtle kind? As in, magic items, enchanted places, yes. People throwing fireballs and stuff, pretty bloody rare. And most of the magic is like psychic mind domination type stuff. Completely covering the eyes, probably a bit of a major no-no, actually, in Magnamund. Feels a bit sort of martial arts, manga bollocks, dickhead, cunt, twat with no brain sort of thing. That is 2, 3, 4, 5 eyebrow piercings just on the one side, and this person unable to breathe. Looks like magic of the Darklords. Slicing wounds to a person with just his fingertips from a distance. Very Sylar from Heroes. This is kind of where we go with the weird skull mask helmets of the Dracarim in the Mongoose version. They're just like a mask with the back of the head left way more exposed. There's another one. And they just look wrong. Again, we're seeing a lot of like exposed back of the head and stuff there. Whereas, if I just go quickly try and find a few illustrations. Where are we? Table of illustrations. Some of these I'm skimming through quickly. Oh, the octopus. Okay. There's the weird rocket launcher thing. Barnadon looking a bit more girly than usual. It's mostly around the eyes, I think. Not so much in the lower face, but the upper face. Winged serpent. There's the ghoul, I definitely remember. And there's the sword we're not guaranteed to have on us at the time. A couple of identikit Gyaks. Whatever that thing is. I barely remembered that, so that's a good thing. More identikit Gyaks. Ruins. Old man. I think he's some kind of soothsayer or fortune teller, possibly. That looks important for later on. Because here we are. So these Dracarim helmets, they're a bit more unique. And you can tell here they're taking inspiration from the old Viking Spang helms. One moment. Okay, so I've done a quick image search for Spanghelm or Spangenhelm. The male... Oh, what's it called when it hangs down like this from the front of the helmet? There's a specific name for it, and I can't remember it off the top of my head. It's not like a Horbergian, because that's on the body. A Horbergian is like between a Horbuck and a Bernie, essentially. Because an Aventail... Isn't an Aventail the one that comes up from the chin and attaches here? And covers the sort of mouth and nose. No, I think this is an Aventail, although an Aventail usually hangs around the back and sides, not the front. So we've very much got the sort of Viking owl face helmet, which could look quite like a skull, right, with the eye rings, protective eye rings connected to a nasal guard, which isn't really very prominent here, and the distinct eyebrow ridges. The eyebrow ridges here are much more stylized and typical of the fancy ones. Again, we got the Aventail attaching to the front. That seems to be something a lot of more modern reenactors go for, attaching an Aventail to this style of helmet. Historically, an Aventail would be a luxury not so many people would afford. Although there'd sometimes be small plates coming down at the side here, not all the way to the shoulders, which would make it a little more looking like a Roman helmet. And another one with an Aventail, bizarrely. But again, with the stylized eyebrows, and these are stronger eye rings than usual. Normally they would... Right, this is actually wrong. And I believe this is a reproduction. Well, not this is wrong because the eye rings should connect inside the eyebrow ridges. They come like here and curve quite strongly to the nasal guard. Here they're quite straight and attached too far out because the eyebrow ridges are too short. Here, better, but this entire gold-looking section screwed on that attaches to the Aventail shouldn't be there, and this is actually where the edge of the eyebrow ring should be. Also, these brow ridges should be at the top of the eyes. This person is wearing it way too high on their head. you pull a helmet down to over your own eyebrows, right, to reduce the chance of something coming into your eye. This, again, way too high. His eyebrows should be up here behind these brow ridges. I don't know who is taking these photographs to show off these helmets. But it is what it is. But anyway, it looks like here we have a, you know, distinct sort of eye rings almost, but they're kind of straight, you know. And a little here as well to make these look a bit more skull-like. Although that sort of nasal cavity looks a bit... You can't tell that those are projecting out. They look like they're sunken in or something. But you take this sort of homogenization of the Dracarim helmet. Again, these are more distinct and unique than the treatment the Gaiacs have received in this book. But you take that, and then you go to Mongoose, giving every single Dracarim the exact same helmet, and they depict it like a military uniform. I think at one point they did a picture of a bunch of them sitting down in some kind of mess hall to eat a meal communally together, and they all had like the same haircut, same helmet. It looked bad, really bad. Looks like we're getting stats for Darklords here, so obviously not. Oh, that's not a very inspiring picture. It just looks very tall and thin. Someone likes bondage. Just saying. Actually, if you've ever had any experience with the... And I'm going off on another side tangent here. With the Cursed Empire role-playing game, you'll know this artwork is pretty tame on the bondage front. For some reason, every single character in Cursed Empire artwork looks like they've stepped out of some hardcore bondage club somewhere. Or they're a famous footballer or minor celebrity. A lot of those seem to appear in the artwork as well for some reason. I met the guy who wrote the Cursed Empire role-playing game at a convention quite a few years ago now. And I did ask him, hey, yeah, there's a distinct sort of, you know, sadomasochistic bondage element in the artwork. I can't remember exactly what I said, okay, but I asked, you know, is that something you're into? And he said, oh no, actually, it's the artist. He's a good friend of mine, and he's really into that particular lifestyle. And he gives me cheap mates rates on the artwork. So that's why the official depictions of characters and creatures in that world all look like, you know, punks, essentially. And torture victims. Anyway, getting back on track, you can kind of see where Mongoose might have got some of their ideas from. But they went too far down the homogenization identikit route. And let's close these pictures and actually get on with the adventure now, because it's been a while. The story so far section at the start of this book is very long, very daunting, and I'm not enjoying hunting through it looking for something relevant for the episode description, but here we go. In all fairness, there's a lot of books to summarize so far. The storylines don't necessarily always encompass just the one previous book. You are the warrior, Lone Wolf, last of the Kai masters of Sommerlund and sole survivor of the massacre that destroyed your kinsmen during a bitter war with your age-old enemies, the Darklords of Helgadad. Many centuries have passed since Sun Eagle, the first of your kind, established the Order of the Kai. Aided by the magicians of Dessi, he completed a perilous quest to find 7 crystals of power, known as the Lorestones of Nixator, and upon their discovery he unlocked a wisdom and strength that lay within both the Lorestones and himself. Yes, finding 7 stones let him learn 10 special abilities. He must have had 3 to start with. He recorded the nature of his discoveries and his experiences in a great tome entitled The Book of the Magnamund. You have discovered this lost Kai treasure and have given a solemn pledge to restore the Kai to their former glory, thereby ensuring the security of your land in the years to come. However, your diligent study of this ancient book has enabled you to master only 3 of the 10 Magnamund disciplines, plus the other 3 we've managed to master since then. I think they should have used the word had instead of has there. Because they're then going to add... You got some more, maybe. However, your diligent study of this ancient book had enabled you to master only 3 of the 10 Magnamund disciplines. To fulfill your pledge, you must complete the quest first undertaken by Sun Eagle over 1,000 years ago. By doing so successfully, you too will acquire the power and wisdom of the Magnamund, which is held within the Lorestone's crystal forms, and we have recovered 3 of them already. 1 in Book 6, 1 in Book 7, and 1 in Book 8. Already your quest has taken you far from your northern homeland. Following in the footsteps of the first Kai Grand Master, you journeyed to Dessi and sought the help of the Elder Magi, the magicians that aided Sun Eagle on his quest long ago. There you learned that one of the 7 Lorestones was still present in their land, hidden deep inside an island stronghold known as Casiorn, or Castle Death. You survived the perils of Castle Death and emerged triumphant, having achieved what the Elder Magi had believed to be impossible, and that let you gain a new discipline if you played the book. Otherwise, tough. You just did it narratively off-screen and didn't get any reward at all. During the victory celebrations held in your honour, you learned that for centuries the Elder Magi had been expecting your coming. An ancient Dessi legend tells of the birth and rise to greatness of 2 Kai, which means sons of the sun. One was named Ikar, which means eagle, and the other was named Skarn, which means wolf. A prophecy foretold that the Kai would both come from the north to seek out the council of the Elder Magi in order that they might fulfill a great quest. Although separated by several centuries, they would share one spirit, one purpose, and one destiny, to triumph over champions of darkness in an age of great peril. Your victory at Casiorn proved that you were Skarn, the wolf of Dessi legend, and Sun Eagle was obviously the eagle. And in keeping with their ancient vows, the Elder Magi promised to help you complete the Magnamund quest. In Elzian, the capital of Dessi, you were tutored in the mysteries of Magnamund and received lessons in lore that you would have learned from Kai masters if only they, like you, had survived the murderous Darklord attack on the Kai monastery 11 years ago. You were eager to learn all that your tutor, Lord Rimoa, would teach you in preparation for the next stage of your quest, but grim news from the Darklands cut short your tuition. In the Darklord city of Helgadad, a civil war had erupted following your defeat of Harkon, Archlord of the Black City. After 5 years, the battle for the throne of Helgadad had finally been won by a Darklord called Gnaag. The other Darklords, now united behind this new leader, were ordered to amass huge armies in preparation for the conquest of Magnamund. So swiftly did their Gaiac legions grow in numbers that the Elder Magi ceased their counselling and arranged for you to begin at once the search for the 3rd Lorestone. Guided by Lord Pydo, a warrior magician of Dessi, you set off on a perilous journey across the free lands of Telestria on your way to the jungle swamps of the Danarg. There, in an ancient temple that was once the Elder Magi's most sacred place of worship, you succeeded in discovering the object of your quest. However, during your escape from the Gnaag, your guide, Lord Pydo, was captured by Darklord agents, and upon your return to Elzian you learned the fearful news that the Darklords were now waging open war throughout Magnamund. There should probably be a dun-dun-dun there for extra dramatic effect. Several lands, after brief but futile resistance, had been overrun completely by Darklord armies. Others had surrendered without fighting in the face of their determined might, and sadly, there were others who chose to betray former friends and allies by joining the Darklord cause, in the misguided hope that they would share in the spoils of victory following the triumph of Darklord Gnaag. One such land was Vassagonia, a powerful desert realm to the north of Dessi. Already her armies had invaded the neighbouring territories of Casiorn and Cloeasia. Cloeasia. Because there's no H, it's not Chloe, no apostrophes of E. Cloeasia, and were preparing to march through the Republic of Anari in order to join Gnaag's horde now advancing across the plain of Slovia. The thought of such an eventuality filled the Elder Magi with dread, for the Lorestone you must find next lies deep below the streets of Tahou, the capital of Anari, in an ancient city built during the dawn of Magnamund. If Tahou were to fall before your arrival, the chances of you completing your quest successfully would be slim indeed, even for a warrior of your renowned skin and daring. While preparations were being made for your journey, you learned that the Darklords had attacked and captured Ruanon, the southernmost province of your homeland of Sommerlund. The news of this calamity shook your resolve and filled you with a desire to forego the journey to Tahou and return home without delay. The Elder Magi implored you not to abandon your quest, and you faced a difficult and crucial decision. Which should you honour? Your vow to complete the Magnamund quest, or your oath of loyalty to your king, an oath which pledged your service in the defence of the Sun Realm? Fortunately, the surprise arrival of an old friend was to decide the matter for you. Mage Master Barnadon, envoy of the Brotherhood of the Crystal Star, the Magicians' Guild of Sommerlund, landed unexpectedly at Elzian, flying aboard his flying ship, the Skyrider. He and his dwarven crew were warmly greeted, for Barnadon, a frequent and favoured visitor to Dessi, was highly respected by the Elder Magi for his mastery of new magic. 6 years had passed since you last met, and there was much you wished to discuss and reminisce about, but there was an urgent matter of duty to perform first. Barnadon had been sent by King Ulnar of Sommerlund to deliver into your hand a royal missive regarding your quest. The scroll, written and sealed by the king himself, ordered you to pursue the Magnamund quest above all other duties. It ended with the words, "Sommerlund has suffered a grievous defeat at Ruanon, but the will of the people is undaunted, and the strength of our army undiminished. Boldly we will resist our enemies, so long as there is hope of the rebirth of the Kai." Barnadon informed you that the king had ordered that he and his skyship be placed under your command. He also delivered the news that the king had bestowed upon you the rank of War Marshal of the Royal Estates. Isn't that a Kai rank as well? Was that War Man? I'm thinking, yeah. Proudly you accepted from Barnadon 2 platinum badges, each craft in the shape of a blazing sun, and affixed them to the colour of your Kai tunic. They signified that you are now a general of the Somlending army, the youngest general there had ever been. The honour bestowed upon you lifted your spirits, and the news that Barnadon would be joining your quest helped greatly to allay your fear of the dangers that lay ahead. For 2 years Barnadon had lived in Tahou as journeymaster to his guild. His knowledge of the city and of the Tahou Cauldron, the entrance to the ancient metropolis which lies buried deep beneath the city streets, would be especially useful. So the cauldron could be like a crater, or even like a well shaft. On the eve of your journey to Tahou, the Elder Magi convened a meeting of the High Council. A golden torch was lit and placed in the centre of their great cylindrical council chamber, as a symbol of their hopes and prayers of your success. Lord Remoa, I can't remember his voice too clearly, but it was kind of deeper, I think. This torch shall burn so long as you, Lone Wolf, pursue your destiny along the path of the Magnamund, said Lord Remoa, speaker for the High Council. Before the gathering of elders, you reaffirmed your vow to restore the Kai, and, as if kindled by a sudden gust of wind, the torch flared brightly, bathing the chamber in its vivid golden glow. As one, the elders rose from their seats and intoned their blessing. May the gods Ishir and Kai protect you on your journey into darkness, Korskan. Here we have the familiar game rules. They haven't changed since the previous book. Magnamund disciplines. Now, we will absolutely want to consult the Law Circles section. We already have 5 of these. 3 for starting book 6. 4th ability for completing book 6. 5th ability for completing book 7. New ability for completing book 8. Weapon mastery we already have, and we get to add 1 more weapon to the list. So we have dagger, bow, sword, mace, axe, throw-in warhammer or spear. I'll see what there have been a couple of, more than one magic spears in the series so far. Well, we'll go for warhammer though. It's been a little underlooked. Plus, in that one piece of Lone Wolf fan art I did many, many years ago, Lone Wolf had a beard, because of course he did, because he was a fucking hero, and he had the summer sword in one hand and a warhammer in the other, which specifically looked remarkably similar to the Gary Chalk warhammer illustrations from previous books. So, we do not have animal control, which would complete the circle of light, which would give us 3 endurance points. We do not have hunt mastery, which would complete the circle of fire and give us 1 combat skill, 2 endurance. I did want animal control and size screen, I believe, for this book. But there's also the potential to attempt to gain Psi Surge and Nexus sometime after completing books 9, 10, and 11 to try and complete the Circle of Spirit for book 12. In theory, we should push for all of the combat skill bonuses, because that way we'll lose less endurance anyway, but we had quite a low starting endurance total, so boosting that could be useful as well, especially for out-of-combat damage. However, we do have the curing discipline, so out-of-combat damage is less of an issue for us. It's more recovering from combat damage since we won't be using the Summer Sword. I will drastically revamp this in a moment. So, Hunt Master, Never Starve and Wild. Generally though, starving is just 3 points of damage, which heals up over the next 3 sections anyway, due to curing. Animal control, fight from the saddle with great advantage. There was a fair bit of riding in the previous book, and I think there is in this book as well, as we have to travel to the city of Tahou. We don't start there. We have to travel through some kind of wilderness situation to get there. Invisibility could be really useful. That would get us half of the Circle of Solaris, but Huntmaster would complete Circle of Fire and half the Circle of Solaris, which would mean if we wanted the Circle of Spirit, we'd never get animal control. So then, I think invisibility is the one we would... Rather than missing out on invisibility or Psi Surge, I think, for the last book. I'm not sure which. Probably. +4 combat skill, but -2 endurance points per round. Okay, so unlike Mind Blast, Psi Surge hurts us to use it. Nexus is also quite a fun ability. I think we want Nexus now or at the end of this book. I think end of this book and Divination. I'd like to see improved disciplines, so animal control. Primates with this Magnikai discipline are able to repel an animal that is intent on harming them by blocking its sense of taste and smell. The level of success is dependent on the size and ferocity of the animal, or hunt mastery. Primates with this skill have a greatly increased agility and are able to climb without the use of climbing aids such as ropes. And for tutelary, invisibility, increase the effectiveness skill when hiding from an enemy by drawing the enemy's attention to a place other than that in which they are hiding. Something for which we would have probably previously used Mind Over Matter, or some kind of consumable item. Passmanship, detects an enemy ambush within 500 yards, unless the endurance score is low due to wounds sustained or lack of food. Divination, recognize objects reach from magical abilities. Principalin, animal control, able to call on a woodland animal if nearby to aid them, either in combat or to act as a messenger or guide. The number of animals that can be summoned increases as a Kai master increases. Yeah, but they still have to be in the area. Hunt mastery, intensify their eyesight at will, give them telescopic vision. Interesting. And Nexus extinguishes fires by force of will alone. Size of fire. That is impressive, actually. Lone Wolf is a fire extinguisher. I think, given that I wanted to have it in the last book, I will go with animal control. Which means we have completed the Circle of Light. I'll move that up to here. So endurance will now total at 31. Combat skill, since we're going to leave the Summer Sword but not the Silver Bow behind, we'll lose out on 8 combat skill. We have a sword and a mace, so we'll still benefit from weapon mastery. So we'll have 19, 2 for shield for 21, 2 for the silver helmet 23, no 8 points here, but 3 points here for weapon mastery, so 26. There we go. So no 34 combat skill, but we'll get to avoid blatantly antagonizing certain foes. The Summer Sword will be transported back to the Kai Monastery. And the Dagger of Vashna will somehow have been retrieved from there for us. Okay. Is there anything here we would like to leave? Well, we'd like to replenish those arrows, which we'll get to do pretty soon. We won't need the lodestone or the Telestrian Pass of Safe Passage anymore. Ooh. So they will now go down here to the Kai Monastery. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 special items. Before leaving Dessi on your journey to the city of Tahou, the Elder Magi give you a map of the Republic of Anari and its surrounding lands. I do, okay. Well, we can see where the Republic of Anari went wrong. They're a republic. No strong permanent leadership figure. And a pouch of gold. Well, we know what to do here. It's the usual. Let's pull up the dice window. We're going to throw a d10. Rolled a 2, 12. Fair enough. 12 gold crowns takes us to 19, which is still a pretty decent number. You can carry a maximum of only 50 crowns, but additional crowns can be left in safekeeping at your Kai Monastery. The Elder Magi offer you a choice of equipment to aid you on your perilous mission. You can take 5 items from the list below, again adding to these if necessary any you may already possess. However, remember you can carry a maximum of 2 weapons and 8 backpack items. Special items. There's the limit, hidden in the body of the text. There we go. So, I'll refill our quiver of arrows. Up to 6 because the quiver can't hold anymore. And being able to fire all 6 in a single adventure is rare. Rope. We have rope. Good. A potion of Lorm Spur. Always useful. So that's 2 items from the list. We may take 5. We probably won't need to. Lantern, which is apparently some kind of special self-lighting lantern. So it's got some kind of clicker inside it to create sparks. A mace, 3 meals, a dagger, 3 fire seeds. We already have 6 fire seeds, so if we just take a couple of meals, because we don't have the ability to hunt for ourselves just yet, and we can always ditch those if we find something better to carry. Also, sack of silver. I don't think we're going to ever... Let's send that back to the Kai Monastery as well. Nah. They'll find a use for it here in creating things for their magical rituals. Or equipment for their laboratories. It's all good. I don't believe we get to use that sack of silver outside of the book it was found in, and I'm not even sure we get to use it there. We have all our stuff. Combat rules, we know them. They haven't changed. Levels, law circles. Improved disciplines. And of course, the ancient Magnamund wisdom before we begin. Your search for the Lorestone of Tahou will be fraught with danger. The Darklords have launched a massive invasion into the free lands of Magnamund in a bid to take over the continent and thwart your Magnamund quest. Make notes as you progress through the story. They will be of great help in this and future adventures. Many things that you find will help you during your adventure. Some special items will be of use in future Lone Wolf adventures, like that ring we gained in the previous book, which we don't seem to have now. Where is it? Oh, that's weird. Because didn't we get like a grey stone ring? Because we didn't get it from the... We didn't get it from the mapmaker's daughter, but I believe from somewhere else. Didn't we swap the lodestone for it? Oh, that's going to bother me now, isn't it? Because I think we need it to protect ourselves from being mind-controlled or side-screen in this book at one point. Why do I not see it listed as a special item anywhere? That is really quite bizarre. Because I think we were able to swap something else for it instead of the lodestone. It was the jeweled mace. One moment. Yeah. Book 8. Right along the road, there is a potion of Alifer at Tardy of a Prophetess. Buy drink at the inn and talk to Jacko. This is vital against Kima. We didn't buy drink at the inn. We didn't talk to Jacko. We did get the potion from Tardy of a Prophetess. At Faro, take Hogfoot Run to buy Grey Crystal Ring. Did we not do that? Because we came through this way. I think we did. +3 psychic combat. I don't see why you can't use it at 74. Book 9. Pick up the crit psychic ring. I don't think you can miss it. Is that the Grey Crystal Ring from Book 8 or a different ring? I can't remember. There is a list by book of items. Jungle of Horrors. Go away. Stop trying to fake make me log into websites with passwords I do not... I don't like this, right? The internet has recently been attempting to make us... to auto-generate our passwords for us so we never even learn them and know what they are. And we're supposed to know what they are and then just log us into places automatically. It's very annoying and you have to say no every fucking time you go to a place, even if you don't have an account there or something. Grey Crystal Ring. 120 Luna or 30 gold crowns. We exchanged it for the silver helm, the jeweled mace or the lodestone. We swapped it for the jeweled mace. So why do I not have it? Must take the Great North Road, then go to Topham. Such pays respect to the deceased and monks reveal themselves to be dark. Yeah, after the fight, the lodestone is found during... Yeah. The Grey Crystal Ring's only use is an unavoidable combat against Shadow Reavers in the Prisoners of Time. If Lone Wolf chooses to engage them in psychic combat, the ring provides a +3 bonus to the combat skill. A major caveat to acquiring the Grey Crystal Ring is that it forces you to enter Faro, which, in turn, unavoidably leads to a fight against a powerful Helghast. The Helghast stats are higher than the Shadow Reavers, which means that if survival is one's main goal, avoiding the Grey Crystal Ring is likely the better option, because you won't have to fight the Helghast. So I'm just gonna... give that a question mark for now. It'll be a Schrodinger's item, and we'll look into it and see. Because it's not here, right? I still have the lodestone, but I do not have the jeweled mace from Book 4, which I traded for it. So I should have the ring, right? And we definitely did fight the Helghast. If any of you... I'm pretty sure I got the Grey Crystal Ring. It's not the ring we need in Book 9, which is great. But it's really bizarre that it's not on the list here for some reason. I don't know how that could have happened. Oh well. Right. Had I read all this? I think I had. I think I may have just got to here. In which case, it's a fairly standard opening. And now we're finally at section 1. After all that intro, I faffed around way too long. And it's nearly 4 in the morning, so I probably won't go for too long. But let's at least get started. A full moon lights the sky above Elzian on the evening you begin your journey to Tahou. Its ashen rays glimmer along the polished wooden outriggers that run the length of the hull of the Skyrider, and illuminate the crystal star ensign and their splendid flag as it flutters proudly from the mizzenmast. I'm not sure about ensign here as a heraldic emblem. It's pronounced ensign. Same spelling. If it's an officer with that particular rank. But as a heraldic device or something on the flag, I'm not so sure. That's similar to boatswain being pronounced bosun on ship. It's to reduce the chance of it being misheard in a storm. So I think it comes from naval tradition. The elders of the High Council have gathered on the roof of their council chamber and, as you and Barnadon climb the boarding ladder to the skyship, you pause to return their farewell salute. Bosun Nolrim, senior member of Barnadon's crew of dwarves, welcomes you and his captain aboard. I believe he's the one who had a chest full of healing potions strapped to his chest back in Book 5. Surveying the craft, you notice that the Skyrider has changed very little since you were last aboard her, when you sailed the desert skies of Vassagonia in search of the Book of the Magnamund. The crew remember that voyage fondly, and are just proud of the part they played in the success of that perilous message. "Take the helm, bosun, and set a course for Navasari," commands Barnadon, as he leads you across the busy deck to his cabin at the prow. Swiftly the lights of Elzian vanish as the Skyrider speeds into the night. A mile below, the jungle of Dessi and the barren peaks of the Cauldron mountains race past beneath the keel, but in the comforting warmth of Barnadon's cabin you feel no sensation of movement. Only the hum of the powerful engine indicates how rapidly you are travelling. Over a delicious meal of salt beef and spiced fruit, Barnadon explains the purpose of your journey to Navasari, a city that lies over 100 miles south of Tahou. Our enemies are advancing across Magnamund like a tidal wave, destroying or carrying with them all in their path, says the blonde-haired magician, pointing to a map of the continent that adorns the cabin wall. Every day a new battle is being fought, and every day we lose another town or village to the Darklords. Before we venture into Tahou, we must be sure that the city has not already fallen to Darklord Gnaag, lest we fly straight into a trap. I have many friends in Navasari, reliable friends who are highly placed in the Senate of Anari. From them we will learn if the city still stands and, if it does, how long we can expect it to resist a Darklord assault. Mid-morning of the following day, the lookout catches a glimpse of Navasari as the Skyrider emerges from the Diageo Pass. Barnadon takes control of the helm and steers the craft towards the east quarter of the city, landing it on the spacious roof of a magnificent star-shaped building that overlooks the River Char. A group of dignitaries, resplendent in high-necked robes of green and yellow silk, greet your arrival. These are some of the friends of whom Barnadon spoke. Sadly, they recount the grim course of events that has recently befallen their country. In the far north, the town of Ressa was destroyed and its people massacred by an army of Gyaks. 2 days later, a similar attack was launched by a Vassagonian army against the town of Zila. They swept along the Anari Pass, burning and looting every village through which they rode and giving no quarter to those who dared resist them. And 3 days ago, on the western border, a fierce battle was fought at the Slovian town of Lovka for control of the bridge across the river Churdas. Shortly before midnight, the might of Darklord Gnaag's horde fell upon the beleaguered garrison. They fought bravely, but by the dawn of the following day, all that remained of the town and its defenders were an acre of scorched earth and a cart full of charred bones. The 3 enemy armies are now advancing towards Tahou. President Toltuda, the head of state, has ordered the evacuation of all women and children from the capital and has begun strengthening the city's defences to increase its chances of withstanding the impending siege. When Barnadon tells of your intentions to go to Tahou, one of his friends offers a few words of caution. "It may be unwise to attempt a landing at the capital," he warns. "Heavy bolt throwers have been positioned on every rooftop and tower in case the city is attacked from the air. The Darklords captured Suentina in such a fashion, and the Tahouese have learned from their neighbours' misfortune. Skyships rarely visit Tahou, which makes it all the more likely that your craft would be mistaken for a hostile attacker." After long deliberation, you and Barnadon decide to leave the Skyrider in Navasari and journey to Tahou by horse. Nolrim is left in charge of the craft and crew with instructions to wait here for your return. If Tahou is besieged and he has not received word from you after 2 weeks, he is to return to Dessi and report that your quest has failed. Early next morning, you and Barnadon climb into the saddles of 2 white Anarian steeds provided by his friends, and set off on your 2-day ride to Tahou. Less than an hour after leaving Navasari, you see a long line of wagons approaching. They are escorted by a troop of cavalry, and each one is crowded with women and children. We can stop and question these people, or ride past them and press on with our journey. Do we think there's likely to be a Helghast among the refugees fleeing from the city, who's been sent as a spy to infiltrate Navasari? I wouldn't put it past the Darklords. I really would not. But they've captured Zila, Ressa, and Suentina, and are closing in on Tahou. I think they've taken Lovka as well. They're coming from these 3 directions. I don't think they'd be extending their reach down here just yet. And if they had spies in Navasari, they would probably already be in place. So I think we will stop and question these people. See what accounts they can give of recent events. An officer in charge of a mounted escort rides forward to meet you. He wears silvered Anarian mail and a winged helmet embossed with the crest of Tahou. And of course, with Anari and Anarian being used so often in this book, we are of course reminded of the Anaria knife. What's that? Oh, they didn't mention it in the films at all. It's to do with Aragorn's ancestry and the Dunedain and their claim to the throne of Gondor. And I think it's mentioned as part of his swearing-in ceremony where he is crowned king. But I couldn't be absolutely certain on that. And with the evil armies besieging the city of Tahou, of course we're going to think of the siege of Gondor. Just saying. "Hail, Captain," says Barnadon upon seeing his crown-shaped badge of rank. The man narrows his eyes and regards you both with suspicion. He is about to reach for his sword when a woman shouts from the leading wagon. "Barnardon! Barnardon, is that you?" Your companion recognizes the woman and returns her wave. "Lorfa! By the stars, I had not expected to meet you here," he says in a surprised tone. The captain relaxes his guard and motions to the wagons to move on, anxious that his entourage is not delayed on the highway. "You can fall in with us or save your reunion till we reach Navasari," he says curtly and rides on without waiting for a reply. "Lorfa is the wife of Chiban, a famous Tahouese magician. He was my mentor when I lived and studied in the city," says Barnardon. "Ah, so maybe Chiban's house." We get to the city, we search out Chiban's house and meet Barnardon there, after separating with him at some earlier point in our adventure. Yeah, we'll let him talk to this woman. Barnardon rides alongside the crowded wagon and talks to Lorfa as the procession continues on its way to Navasari. After a few minutes' conversation, she hands him a scrap of parchment and they bid each other farewell. "They are the last of the evacuees," he says as you continue your ride north. "They expect the enemy to reach Tahou in 2 days' time. They've already seen Gaiac scouts, and early this morning a squadron of Kran were sighted high in the western skies. She advises us to steer clear of a village called Sidara. It's rumoured to have already fallen to the enemy. She also gave me this." Barnardon hands you a scrap of parchment. It contains a few lines of Anarian script, an address, and a signature. It is an invitation to stay at Chiban and Lorfa's house in Tahou. It may be useful when we reach the city gate. Mark this invitation on your action chart as a special item that you keep in your pocket. If you already carry the maximum number of special items, you must discard one in favour of this new item. Well, we're just shy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Arguably with the grey crystal ring. If we don't know if we have the grey crystal ring and it's a question mark, let's put it with the stored items, since we now know we won't need it in this book at all. Right. It's not introduction, is it? It's a invitation. There we go. I'm not listing his wife's name here because it's Chiban and Lorfa's house, but she's fled the city. She's not there. She's not residing there anymore. So it's unlikely Joe will say, "Hey, do you want to go to Lorfa's house? Have you ever met her? Do you know who she is?" And we'll be like, "Who?" It's more likely he'll say, "Do you have an invitation to go to Chiban's house?" Right? We continue our journey north. Oh, wait, and avoid Sidara. I will say avoid. V is next to C on the keyboard. With names like Navasari and Sidara and Chiban, the Republic of Anari is developing a very Indian feel. Not that the artwork necessarily depicts that. But let's see, because we were getting a very African Indian feel from Dessi. The thing is, I think Dessi is close to the desert where the Amazons live, which is like down here somewhere, or like way over here. With Telkos, right? And then we got like the Stormlands. In Qualand they have Yorkshire accents, but it's kind of an Eastern European vibe to it. Obviously, Vassagonia is very Arabian, Persian, Turkish. Sommerland is fairly English. Durenor is very French, but a lot of Swedish fans want it to be very Swedish because of the mountains. And of course, Kalt with the natives who dress like Eskimos. Look, you can see the real world similarities, but you don't need to be reductive, right? Reductionism is actually bad because it's like those people who say, here we go again. It's like those people who say, oh, the Lord of the Rings is all based on Tolkien's experiences in the First World War. It's like, guess what? Yeah, he was in the First World War. He was involved in trench warfare. He had a lot of those experiences. But that doesn't mean you need to belittle his imagination and reduce it to just that. There's so many other things in there. You know, he was a professor of linguistics and language. And I don't just mean languages like Elven and Dwarvish, but language. The people in Bree, the village on the edge of the Shire, speak very differently to the Rohirrim in Rohan, or the men of Gondor. They speak differently. So, in Bree, everybody speaks like a bit of a country bumpkin over near the edge of the Shire. Their speech is fairly similar to that of the hobbits. And in in Rohan, the Rohirrim speak in iambic pentameter in blank verse. They are literally composing poetry as they speak, which is a very Viking and Anglo-Saxon thing to do, which of course is fitting because, you know, Tolkien's idea for the Rohirrim was, what if the Anglo-Saxons rode horses like knights? And when we get to Gondor, the characters, not just the locals, but the characters who have travelled to Gondor begin to... Gondor uses very archetypal, almost Elizabethan English, lots of these and thous and ye's, and big, dramatic, heroic declarations. And yes, you could say, oh, that's just the writer trying to make things sound more epic and impressive and ramp things up towards the end of the story. Absolutely. But when they leave Gondor and return, they revert to their own earlier speech patterns as they go home. So when the hobbits get back to the Shire, they don't carry on speaking like they did in Gondor. They speak like they did in the Shire at the beginning of the story. And the other thing, of course, is in the whole Gondor section of the third book, the natives of Gondor speak much more that way. And the Rohirrim still speak like Rohirrim, but embracing a little bit of the Gondorian speech patterns and stuff. It's almost like they are learning the foreign language and using it a bit as they travel to a foreign country. And the other heroes, they start speaking a bit like the characters of Gondor, but with their own... It's very distinct. People have often said that The Lord of the Rings is an adventure in different languages, travelling through different languages, as much as different countries and national identities, right? So, these are things that he wouldn't have necessarily experienced as much in the First World War. Don't get me wrong. There would have absolutely been different languages. But my point is, it's like the people who say the Chronicles of Narnia are very Christian. You can see the Christian elements there. But if that's all you're willing to let the stories be, you're missing out on a lot of creativity. A lot of creativity and beautiful writing and penmanship that went into their creation. So, just like here, I've said that Anari and Navasari and, Chiban, it's all sounding very sort of Indian here, especially with Bidar and Makakush Highlands over here, right? That doesn't mean I'm literally imagining all of the people in the Republic of Anari going around going, Papa Ding Ding, no ticket, no ride. Not at all. And if you want to know what that is from, that was from school, actually. Some of the lads in my class one day were recounting how an Indian bus driver refused to let them get on the bus without a ticket, and he said, Papa Ding Ding, no ticket, no ride. And so they weren't able to get the bus. But they then used that a lot to taunt one of our teachers, who was not Indian. He was born and raised in India. So but his parents weren't Indian, so he wasn't ethnically Indian. Culturally, he was pretty Indian, and he had a Dutch wife, and I can't remember where his original family is from. And he'd moved over here sometime as an adult, So, goodness knows, people have complicated backgrounds, and that's all cool. But they sort of teased him, pretended he was Indian, and tell you what, when he wanted to, he could really throw a piece of blackboard chalk. We're talking, significant impact on the wall behind you. He would tell people to duck or dodge before he threw it. And I think it took them about 2 years to work out that when they were mucking around behind him, he could still see what they were doing in the reflections in his glasses, using them like wing mirrors to see behind him. Yeah. Those are the days, eh? Right, so anyway, yeah. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to be reductionist, saying, the inspiration for this is clearly this, or part of the inspiration for this is this. I'm not saying it can only be that one thing, right? I think that Anari, the illustrations of the soldiers of Anari, don't look particularly Indian. And I don't mean ethnically, I mean what they're wearing. They look a bit more like a mixture of Vassagonian and not really anything we would have seen over here in Eldenora or up here in the Stormlands. But they look kind of like less Vassagonian than Vassagonians mixed with something else. Kind of the Eastern European of Slovia and the Stormlands, actually. So they look like a kind of mixture of Vassagonians and Stormlanders. And that is totally fine, right? When I'm commenting on the similarities to something and the possible influences or inspiration, I'm not saying that's all there is, right? It's like in the Warhammer world, right? The old world. The Empire is blatantly the Holy Roman Empire, which is Germany, That place over to the west, oh God, where was Potion Square? That city, independent city-state on the western edge of the Empire, that's Holland, right? Bretonia is France. Although the Bretonians are more British, more English than French. For example, the Isle of Albion is literally the Isle of Albion before the Romans discovered it and tried to invade it. So it's full of Celts and Druids, and there's stone circles and stuff, The Norska is Scandinavia. Kislev is like Eastern European with Polish winged lancers and Russians and stuff. It's very easy to see. What's it? Estalia is Spain, Tilia is Italy. And I heard something that means I might be needed. One moment. Turns out I was needed. Anyway, the point I was getting to with the old world in Warhammer is it's very obviously our world. It's a satirical version of our world. But if that's the only thing you're willing to allow it to be, then you miss out on the creativity and the possibilities presented by it. For example, you've got, Araby, they're Arabians. Nippon is Japanese. There's the other place, which is China. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, bizarrely, even though they recently expanded on it and gave them an army recently that they haven't had for a very long time, since about 3rd edition. The Border Princes is like the Balkans, But, yeah. So, let's say the Empire are very German, right? You can tell from their clothes, they're very Renaissance Germany, Holland, and surrounding areas like, Austria, Switzerland, places like that, right? And they have very German names. But if you try to make them only be Germans and start trying to force, recent German historical archetypes from stuff after the medieval and Renaissance period, then they stop being the Empire and just become a stand-in for Germans. The Arabians, for example, it's literally spelled Arabian, as in Arabian, and instead of Arabian, with just a Y instead of an I, right? When they did the whole thing in, I want to say 6th edition, promoting the Bretonnian Crusades against the Arabians, they didn't really make a lot of models for an Arabian army, because the Arabians obviously are the Saracens and the Arabs. At that point, if you got obsessed with the idea of the Bretonnians being Crusaders, as opposed to just a generic medieval knight faction, and bought into a whole sort of Crusader identity for them, that means you were missing out on, all the Arthurian mythology that goes into the Bretonnian faction, for example. I'm trying to think of another. So, like, the dwarfs, yeah, they have Viking names, but their personality is much closer to that of Yorkshiremen, and Welsh miners. Predominantly Yorkshiremen, actually. As evidenced by stuff in, a lot of the White Dwarf articles and things. But if you actually insist that all the dwarfs going around going, "Hey up, Chuck," or "Yeah, 'cause like by gum, bloody hell, that's nasty," it's like, yeah, you know what? The northern accents do suit the dwarfs in the old world better than the Americans obsessively getting stuck on the idea that the dwarfs have to have Scottish accents, because Scottish accents go so well with Viking names. I think it's because the Scots have a reputation for being tight-ass penny-pinching gits who will do anything for money, and that's why the Americans got hung up on the idea of dwarfs having Scottish accents, and then trying to force it onto... The thing is, if you get that idea stuck in your head of dwarfs only having Scottish accents, let's say you read the Smith of the World trilogy by Sir Michael Scott Rohan, in which the dwarfs are like fucking Japanese in a Viking setting, right? It's like, it's very much a sort of Viking Anglo-Saxon setting. On the surface world of the humans, the dwarfs living underground have squinty slanty eyes and straight black hair, and their beards are straight black as well. They don't have Japanese names, but they have distinctly oriental features, which none of the surface dwellers in that part of the world have. their names are possibly even more Scandinavian in design than the human characters on the surface. But, you know, do I look at that and think, oh, they're Japanese dwarfs? Well, maybe at first glance, but that would be horribly reductive, and I'd miss out on the other things the dwarfs do in that story, where it's like, oh, wait, that's just how they look physically. They have other cultural elements and their own distinct identity. So here, looking at the Republic of Anari, while I could say a number of the names here seem to have a distinct Indian vibe to it, that doesn't mean I'm being reductive and saying these people are just an analogue for Indians from our world. Even though the majority of Magnamund's races are based on historical human cultures and nationalities. But that's a good thing in the case of Magnamund, not because we say, oh, those are bad people over there, we don't like them, or anything. It's because we get to travel around the world and explore and meet all these different wonderful, magnificent cultures and have adventures in their countries. It's great. And it's the same sort of thing with the old world in Warhammer, where you can be a bit tongue-in-cheek. You know, I know a guy who, when the new Goblin models get... Well, I knew a guy, let's say. I haven't seen him for over 20 years now. He was actually one of the local Games Workshop store managers. You know, not just a regular staff member. When the new Goblin models came out, he was happily showing everyone the large hooked noses on the goblins and saying how they looked really Arabian. And coming across as a... Let's put it this way, he is the guy who bragged about beating up a few Asians at a weekend at one point and stuff like that, right? Is that... Yeah. Wouldn't say he was a friend, particularly. Went in there and bought a few things a few times. Stayed in the shop in between lessons when I didn't have anything else to do. When I had like a few hours off every once in a while. But yeah, he was very excited. He was one of those people who called anyone Middle Eastern or Oriental Asian. He was like, they're Asians, innit? I've seen Asians. You know, it's like, yeah, I think he was probably a racist. Let's put it that way. And the way we defeat racism is by not talking about it and not making a big deal about it. Honestly, that's how we defeated racism in the 90s. It's not our fault a bunch of wankers brought it back since then and are trying to make a really huge deal about it. Just don't talk about it. Don't give it power, you know. And likewise, I don't think the people of Anari are Indian. I'm just commenting on how some of the names sound a bit Indian, and I may not have particularly been aware of that when I was much younger. The other thing being, of course, that most of the nations in Magnamund do appear to be stand-ins for nations from Earth, not arranged in the same locations geographically, and that's a good thing because it adds cultural diversity. A lot of fantasy settings around this time, in the 70s and 80s and 90s, were ridiculously homogenous, where the humans were the same culture wherever you went, whichever country you went to. So having humans with different cultural identities and outlooks and using different equipment, different city layouts and stuff, and different local customs, as there are in Magnamund, because it's literally Magna, as in very big, magnificent, huge Mund. It's literally like our world from our ancient history, but larger than life, ramped up. These people are like, yeah, this is amazing. Go see these people. Wow, awesome. Have an adventure. Cool. Now go somewhere else. Look, different people. Yeah, great. You know, that's kind of the vibe from Magnamund. It's very enthusiastic, very bombastic. Even though for the most part, it feels fairly grounded in reality. The fantasy is there, but it's not overpowering or overwhelming. It's not like some kind of cartoony setting with like people summoning genies and stuff all the time. For example, the sort of thing you might expect in in an Arabian Nights setting like Al-Qadim. You could imagine things getting quite like a sort of Disney fairground ride or something, Whereas this feels more grounded because Magnamund is a very human world. The non-humans, like the Ogrons, the dwarfs, the Drodarin giants, are very low in number. They're vastly outnumbered by the humans, and they do their own thing. Right? For the most part, the dwarfs stay within the Kingdom of Bor, and occasionally they go out, as little mercenary companies working here or there. They don't send out entire armies to go and invade places or anything. They're kind of like the Swiss, right? They are neutral, politically speaking. Although, all of those dwarven mercenary companies, whenever their contract ends and they finish their tour of duty, they go back to Bor and hand in their spy reports on the people they've been working for. So the great thing about the Dwarfs of Bor is they have the power of gunpowder, and they're responsible enough to know how dangerous it would be in the wrong hands, and they keep it out of everyone else's hands because they don't want to let anyone get hold of it and do nasty, horrible stuff with it. Oh, so if the people of Anari are a little bit like people from India or the surrounding countries in our world, great. And if they're not, that's also okay. Let's see if I can get back on track without another distraction, or if we get to an illustration for the episode, that would be great. Otherwise, I'll have to use the map. Right, we will continue to ride northwards. For 3 hours, you ride without pause or rest along the Tahou highway. On either side, the whispering grasses of the Anari plains stir lazily in the thin breeze of morning. Villages are few, but wherever there are trees, you are sure to find a group of huts nearby. The highway descends along a ridge towards a copse of stunted trees where a circle of simple dwellings have been built around a well. At your approach, a bell is sounded and several peasants appear, each holding a basket of assorted wares which they urge you to buy. What is the name of this village? We were warned to steer clear of a village called Siddhara, which obviously is very close to Siddhartha, the name Buddha had when he was a prince before he became Buddha. So if we're going along this road to Tahou, if all the villagers are coming out trying to sell us things, all of the people in Tahou who are not of, fighting age and skill and strength have been evacuated south to Navasari. The people in this village would have seen all those refugees fleeing through. I doubt they'll have come out and celebrated and gone, hey, guys, you want to come buy some stuff? So now, as we come through this village, a bell is sounded and several peasants appear, each holding a basket of assorted wares which they urge you to buy. Couple of things here. Number one, they could be desperate to trade with us because they have they weren't able to trade with any of the refugees, and they're just so glad to see someone going in the opposite direction. They don't appear to be questioning the fact we're going in the opposite direction towards the besieged city, the beleaguered city, soon to be besieged, rather than away from it, which is the direction they were expecting anyone to go. This feels like an ambush. In which case, would the peasants not appear afraid? They're urging us to purchase from the baskets, meaning they're close enough to communicate with us, and we can probably see that they are peasants. I will continue on through the village without stopping. And presume this is the village of Sidara that we were warned about that has already fallen to the enemy. We haven't been given the name of the village explicitly, but onwards we shall ride. And just checking. Okay. Good beggars, remain. Okay, well, maybe this isn't Sidara. But I chose to ride on, and onwards I shall ride. Maybe if we perish and replay the book, I will be able to encounter those people later on. As the hour of noon approaches, the rutted highway of khaki-coloured earth rises gently towards a flat-topped house near the horizon. Outside, at the entrance, is a three-legged stand erected over a fire made of gorkas dung. A battered tin pot full of soup. I think gorkas are like yaks, probably. A battered tin pot full of soup hangs from the crotch of the stand, and a group of farmhands stand in line waiting for the muddy liquid to boil. The smell of the fire is awful. Yeah, gorkas dung probably smells quite a lot. So yeah, I could go gorkas or yaks, but also maybe like oxen or buffalo or bison, because they pulled along. They're gorkas, right? They can be whatever they want. But similar to those things, gives me a point of reference, right? The smell of the fire is awful, and it has to be blown on ceaselessly to prevent it from going out. Close to the house is a dirt track which branches off the main highway and disappears to the west. A signpost, its wood cracked and twisted, points along the track. It reads Tahou, 95 miles. We do, I believe, have the discipline of craftsmanship. The sign is warped and cracked and twisted. I suspect it's pointing the wrong way. Immediately, you sense that the signpost is pointing in the wrong direction. Tahou lies in the north, yet this signpost is pointing towards the river Churdas to the west. We can ignore the signpost and continue along the highway, or question the farmhands. Well, we've already established which way we want to go. If we question them, it may be assumed we don't know which way to go and have the option of going both ways still. They may tell us some useful news recently, but it could lead to misdirection, and they could say, yeah, go west. Sod it, let's ask them. Like most southern Anarian peasants, these farmhands are simple folk. They have heard nothing of the war in the north, and know nothing about the Darklord armies that are poised to assault their capital. All they are able to tell you is that a great many wagons carrying takas, or rich city folk, have travelled the road to Navasari in the last 10 days. Yep, we're aware of that. They would be happy to share their humble meal of corn soup with you, but the smell of their dung fire has destroyed your appetite, and you refuse their offer politely. Barnadon, who has been talking with the owner of the house, returns to his horse and nods at the signpost. It's pointing the wrong way. A few days ago, one of the Takas wagons ran into it, and nobody has bothered to fix it. With a wave, the farmhands bid you farewell, and as you urge your horses back onto the highway. You are now hungry and must eat a meal or lose 3 endurance points. We have meals. Let's make some room in our pack. 5 miles along the highway, you reach another junction, where a cart track bears off to the west. A whitewashed stone marker at the side of the road says, Sidara, 5 miles. We can follow the cart track to Sidara, or remember the warning and blatantly stay on the highway to Tahou. The afternoon passes swiftly as you ride across endless miles of treeless grassland. You stumble upon no village or hamlet and spend the hours listening to Barnadon's account of recent events in Sommerlund and the Last Lands. 3 years have passed since you were last in the land of your birth, and you are hungry to hear all that has transpired since then. It is an hour past sunset, and night is drawing its black cloak around you when you see a flickering red light on the road ahead. It is the village of Chardi. A great fire roars in behalf of Guyuk's tavern in Chardi, inviting the travel sore to stop and warm their weary bones. You decide to stay overnight, and, as soon as you have stabled your horse, you enter the tavern to ask the price of a room. The tap room is surprisingly quiet. It is full of villagers and farmers, but they are a sullen crowd, content to sit in silence and brood over their glasses of lovka. If that's not a stand-in for vodka, I don't know what is. A strong Slovian rye spirit named after the town where it was first distilled. And as we know, when we were playing Of Ash and Steel, a game created by Russians, and we spent countless hours trying to find bottles of vodka for a quest, I eventually learned that there are no bottles of vodka. There are empty vodka bottles, but there are no bottles of vodka in the entire game. There's lots of bottles of a drink called rye, R-Y-E, you know, like the plant. Turns out, it's a translation error, and the rye is the vodka. So knowing that Lovka in this game is a rye spirit from Slovia makes total sense. Guyuk, the tavern owner, greets you with a nervous nod of his shiny bald head and shows you to a table. There are no bars or counters in Anarian taverns. Instead, the customers sit at long banqueting tables and wait for the owner and his staff to serve them. He smiles uneasily as he answers your inquiry about a room. A single room with a bed would be 12 loon each. 12 loon is 3 gold crowns because 1 loon is 4. 1 gold crown is 4 silver loons. Now, I believe we had some silver loons in the previous book. We don't appear to have any now. So, we will pay 3 gold crowns. A bit pricey because we only rolled 2 and got 12 at the start of the book, but hey, sure. If we don't have the money, I have a feeling that if we don't have the money, we have an opportunity to gamble, or I think there's more riddles in this book, okay, so we paid anyway. Guyuk gives you each a key to your room and offers you both a glass of Lovka on the house. Gratefully you accept and down the warming liquor in one gulp. You notice that at the far end of your table a man sits with his 2 young sons. This is where I think there's riddles. They appear to be gambling with a group of plains farmers seated opposite, although you can see no money changing hands. We can go sit next to them, engage Guyuk in conversation, or order some food. That's a high price for a meal, for a room that doesn't include a meal already. I don't know if these 2 options are mutually exclusive. Let's speak to Guyuk a little. I think there is some riddling here. Sod it. I'm intrigued. The father and the farmers are taking it in turns to ask each other riddles. In Anari, it is forbidden to gamble for money on games of chance, but the wily Anarians get around the law by devious means. They gamble on being able to answer riddles correctly, which demands exercising skill rather than chance, and they wager goods and sometimes their services in place of money. By the time you join them, the father and his sons have amassed quite an assortment of valuable items, and the plains farmers are clearly anxious to win back some of their lost possessions. We can join in and take an Anarian gamble. We can take part in the... Don't want to take part in the game, but rather engage with Taverner and... Okay, order him... No, we'll experience for riddling, which is pretty much always arithmetic times in this series so far. It is the father's turn to ask a riddle, but firstly, you must decide on your stake. You can choose to gamble either one special item or 3 backpack items. If you should fail to answer the riddle correctly, you will forfeit the item or items you have staked. If you answer the riddle correctly, you will win the chance to pick any 2 items from the father's horde of valuables. Let me see now. Obviously, I could listen to the riddle first and decide what I want to risk. So I can 3 backpack items. We could go. That is 4, not 3. A meal, tincture of oxidine, which probably isn't any good after the last book, and a potion of Lomspur, for example. 1 special item. We don't really want to lose any of these. These are all very nice items. We're hardly going to gamble the Dagger of Vashna now, are we? So, if we go... There we go. Marked. A hush descends as you wait for the riddle patiently. The father, whose name is Kmar, draws his dagger from his scabbard and lays it on the table. Then he rests his hand on the shoulder of his eldest son and says, "This dagger is now half as old as my son Loan was when the dagger was new. Loan is now 15 years old. How old is the dagger?" This is a 5, 10, 15 thing, isn't it? Right? He got the dagger when his son was 10. So the dagger is now 5 years old, which is half of 10. So 115, knock off the first digit to get 15. Table of contents, numbered sections. Wait, the question was how old is the dagger, isn't it? The dagger is 5 years old. Oh, I almost blew it there, didn't I? You have answered the riddle correctly, and Kmar displays his collection of valuables, from which you may choose your winnings. You may take any 2 of the articles listed. They are backpack items. A silver bowl, a vial of gold dust, an altar cloth, a scroll of honour, and Jadin anklets. I think we've seen Jadin before in Cult. We can discard items we already have if we... There's a full-up riddle, isn't there? Oh, okay. Now, a silver bowl, a vial of gold dust, the altar cloth, scroll of honour. Which of these are likely to be useful further on? Well, first off, I get to keep my stake. And I have space for exactly 2 items. I'm drawn to the silver bowl and the vial of gold dust. I feel the altar cloth is important. I'm not sure the scroll of honour will help. It might help in a situation where I need to prove I'm an honourable man. Say, look, here's proof of some valuable deed in the past that somebody else did. I don't think 2 adjacent items on the list should be taken. If there are 2 best items to choose here, I don't think it's going to necessarily be the first 2. It might be the first and third. I don't think it'd be the second and third, the third and fourth, etc. I don't think the anklets hold much of a memory at all, really. So I think the silver bowl and the altar cloth will go with that. Since you have displayed your intelligence so effectively, the plains farmers are now reluctant to continue gambling. Kmar and his sons gather up their winnings and bid you good night, and the farmers follow suit. Well, we can talk to the tavern owner for a bit. Guyuk is a nervous and jittery sort of man. He is afflicted by all manner of tics and twitches and is given to worrying about anything and everything. Recently his condition has worsened, and in light of the events in the north, it's not difficult to understand why. "Oh, what's to become of us? Where will it all end?" he mutters, wringing his pudgy hands and casting his eyes to the rafters. Every day for the last 2 weeks, wagons filled with women and children have been leaving Tahou for the south, yet the Senate tells us that nothing is wrong, and we should go about our business and not concern ourselves with city affairs. Well, I for one, am not a fool. I tell you, they're keeping us in the dark about what's really happening, and I'm not going to wait around and suffer the consequences. I'm closing up and moving out at the end of the week, and if you two gentlemen would take some friendly advice, you'd be wise to do the same. Someone near the tavern is calling for more vodka. Before you can question Guyuk further, he snatches up a bottle and scurries away to serve his thirsty customer. We could order some food or retire to our room. Yeah, we can waste more money and order food. Might get something valuable. We're not hurt. We don't need healing. If we go to bed without ordering a meal, will we need one? Let's try and keep body and soul together. A serving girl ushers you into an adjoining room where smoke from an open charcoal fire spirals up to the roof, filling the air with its pungent aroma. You seat yourselves at a round oak table, and the girl brings 2 plates loaded with broiled Gorka steak and roasted parsnips. 2 tankards of ale serve to wash down the feast, which Barnadon, in a generous mood, pays for with 12 silver loon, the same price we paid for our room. Having satisfied your hunger and revived your strength, you may restore any endurance points lost in your adventure so far. You bid Barnadon good night and retire to your room. We'd have had to go to the village of Sadara to lose endurance, I imagine. The room, which overlooks the courtyard and stables, is small yet surprisingly clean and comfortable. You sleep well, but you are rudely awoken at dawn by the clang of a brass handbell. Guyuk's wife is walking along the courtyard, ringing it for all she's worth. "Daybreak! Daybreak! All awake! All awake!" she cries, her voice only slightly less piercing than her bell. Quickly you wash and dress before gathering together your equipment and heading for the stables. Barnadon is already there, having risen before dawn to prepare the horses. The sky is cloudless and the air is warm and still as you ride out of Chardi. Open grasslands stretch before you, broken occasionally by the low, whitewashed farm buildings and peasant dwellings. It is noon when you arrive at a mass of standing stones that line the highway approaches to the village of Fia. Barnadon recalls a local legend that the Black Zakan of Vassagonia once came to wage war on the defenceless inhabitants of Fia, who had no army. The besieged people offered up prayers to the goddess Ishir, who was significantly moved by their plight to cause the wicked Vassagonians to become petrified right where they stood, clad in full armour and clasping their weapons. It strikes you that the Fians may very soon have cause to pray for Ishir's help a second time. A mile beyond the village you see a cloud of dust on the highway. Do we have the discipline of hunt mastery? I don't believe we do. We do not. So, in that case, the dust cloud grows bigger and the rumble of hoofbeats can now be heard drifting towards you across the open plain. 20 lightly armoured riders approach, their lances bearing blue pennants embroidered with the arms of Tahou, their faces stern and unsmiling beneath the peaks of their winged helmets. Their sergeant makes a signal and the horsemen change formation, drawing up into a circle that quickly closes around you. "State your business," bellows the sergeant. "Why do you ride to Tahou?" At first, you are suspicious of their identities, but your basic Kai sixth sense confirms that these men are genuine Anarian rangers. We can tell them our real reason for riding to Tahou. Show them the invitation we have to go and visit Chiban the Magician. Or demand to know by what right they are hindering our passage to the capital. I think if we tell them the real reason, are they likely to accompany us and escort us on the way there? Possibly. But if we say we're coming to your city to go into the ruins near it and take away a valuable magical artifact, that could defeat the evil army that is invading your country and take it away out of your country so you won't have it anymore. They might not respond too well to that, so let's show them the invitation. The burly sergeant snatches the parchment from your hand and studies it carefully. Without raising his head, he asks how two Northlanders came to possess a personal invitation to one of Tahou's most respected households. When Barnadon explains your meeting with Lorfa and how he was once a student of Chiban, her husband, the sergeant somewhat reluctantly accepts your story and returns the invitation. "Stay on the highway and make sure you reach Tahou by sunset," he says as he signals to his troop to let you pass. "Enemy scouts have been sighted in the hills south of the capital. If you're not inside the city walls by nightfall..." He draws a finger quickly across his throat. You thank him for his advice and watch as he and his troop wheel away and ride south. You pocket the invitation and glance apprehensively at Barnadon before pressing on with your journey north. If we'd told him our real reason for coming here, we wouldn't have had any proof to back it up, so his doubt would have been significant. He may have considered us to be enemy spies. It is late afternoon when you see the Tahou hills. They appear like a mirage on the horizon, shimmering beyond the haze that rises from the sun-baked plain. Without stopping for food or rest, you hurry across the hot grasslands and follow the highway as it ascends toward the mouth of a pass. A stone watchtower guards the entrance to the hills, and a cluster of whitewashed huts lie huddled around its base. We do possess the discipline of passmanship. We used it in a previous village. And we've reached the maximum rank available at this point in the series. Your eyes tingle with a premonition of danger. You are sure that the watchtower and huts conceal an enemy lying in ambush. You tell Barnadon your fears, and he looks ahead, his keen eyes narrowing, but the pass is dark and with the gathering dusk, and he cannot detect anything unusual about the settlement except that it appears deserted. If we avoid the pass, we'll have to make a wide detour and rejoin the highway at a place deeper in the hills, he says, scanning the shadowy highlands. Even if we don't get lost, we'll be lucky to reach Tahou before nightfall. We can gallop through the pass despite the risk of an ambush. No, I think we will trust our sense of danger and make a wide detour. Then we'll have to make sure to make extra haste to make the city by nightfall. Stones rattle beneath your horse's hooves as you skirt the slopes of the Tahou hills. Nearly an hour slips by before you happen upon the mouth of a gorge that offers a shorter route to the north. You enter and ride along a dried-out watercourse that winds for a mile between turrets of dull-coloured rock before rising steeply into the hills. At this point, a small stone hut sits overhanging the gorge. Candlelight flickers at its window and a wisp of wood smoke rises from its chimney. Let's investigate the hut. This is an isolated location away from the village. I know I said we should maybe try and race on, but let's investigate. This feels like one of those optional gamebook situations where if you don't check all the side paths, you're missing out. You dismount and hand Barnadon the reins of your horse before approaching the door of the hut. With the tip of your weapon, you lift the latch and push it open, wary of what may lurk inside, but the hut seems to be empty. It is furnished with a table, bed, and chair, and a saucepan full of foul-smelling broth is simmering on the grate of a fire well charged with freshly cut logs. We do have the discipline of divination. You detect that someone is hiding in a cellar located directly below where you are now standing. Access to this hiding place is via a trapdoor in the far corner of the hut close to the fireplace. We can open the door and trapdoor and demand the person show himself. They're probably afraid of robbers. Ignore the trapdoor and search the hut instead. Push the bed over the trapdoor, trapping them in there so they starve to death. There is a hut by the roadside, somewhere in the first 9 books of this series, It's either in book 4, book 6, book 7, or this one, where you can go in, open a trapdoor, go down into the cellar, and a bony hand closes the trapdoor and seals you in, and you starve to death. That happens when you're alone, when you don't have a companion who can just open the trapdoor. So if we go down in there and someone tries to close the trapdoor behind us, Barnadon will be behind us unless he goes down first, right? And it's a lonely death, starving to death. It's not a starving to death of a friend, and he's a magician. He could easily open the trapdoor somehow if it was sealed behind us, right? I mean, he can cast lightning bolts. We'll open it and show authority. A minute passes before the lurker shows himself. He is a hunchbacked old man dressed in rags with thin grey hair and a wrinkled face that bears the impression of a lifetime's poverty. 2 eyes, clouded with cataracts, stare up at you from a dark and dusty hole in the ground. "Take what you will, but please spare my worthless life," he pleads. "You have nothing to fear from me, old man," you reply. "Here, let me help you out of this hole." And so saying, you take hold of his scrawny arms and lift him with ease, for he weighs no more than a young child. He hobbles over to the fireplace and stirs the broth with a wooden spoon which he keeps on a string around his neck. He offers you some of this smelly gruel, but you refuse politely. Honestly, it's all he's got. We can give him some of our food as well. Something to add to it. Do you know the story of the stone soup? Huh? I really shouldn't. We've been derailed enough times this episode as it is. So the stone soup is a lie. It's a myth. It does not exist. There's a chap who turns up as a kitchen like a beggar. He says, "Oh, can I just stay here? It's cold outside. I need somewhere to stay. You know what? I really fancy a bit of stone soup. I've got this magic stone. You can make this incredible soup. You put the stone in the cooking pot, add the water, and it'll make this amazing soup." And he lets the cook boil the soup for a bit, boil the stone, and he asks to taste it. He says, you know what? It's not bad. Not bad at all. I reckon it needs a little something more, though, before it'll be finished. How about some potatoes? Lets it boil some more, taste it. You know what? That's nice. That's good, but I think it needs a little bit of something extra. How about some cabbage? And he keeps adding to it, and some, some garlic, and by the time he's finished, all of the ingredients that have been added to the stone make a whole pot of soup. And then they eat the soup, and he goes to take the stone away with him. And the cook says, "This soup was amazing. Wow, I haven't made a soup this good in ages. And you got you got all of that from that magic stone and the things I added to it." And the man says, "Yeah." And the cook tries to buy the stone from him, and he says, "Oh, I couldn't. Not, it's a very He lets him haggle him up to a ridiculously high price and gives him the stone and then leaves, and then the cook realizes he's been conned. And you got the cook and his friends going around the building wondering if any of the bricks are a special soup stone as well that they could make stone soup with. And of course, the joke being that the stone is the only ingredient that isn't actually part of the meal, and everything else is provided by the person who just lives there. So yeah, stone soup. His thin, smelly gruel is like stone soup, and we're adding an ingredient of rations from our pack to give him a nice, healthy meal. He may give us some good information before we leave. Gratefully, he accepts your offer and adds the food to the broth bubbling on the grate. He tells you that he is a hermit and has lived here at the east of the gorge for most of his life. He is nearly blind, but he knows every inch of these hills as well as he knows his own hut, and offers to show you and Barnadon a shortcut to Tahou. Wait, we saw that image of the fortune teller with the cloak of feathers, didn't we? I don't think this is him, but let's accept his help. Speaking of which, if we don't, is that the same? It is the same option as if we hadn't given him food. So yeah, we'll accept his help. We bought into this already, let's benefit from it. The hermit takes you back into the gorge and leads you to a place where a massive outcrop of rock overhangs a tangle of bushes and foliage. Hidden behind this leafy cover is the entrance to a cave. A rivulet of fresh water trickles from the cave mouth, and the sound of constant dripping echoes in its distant depths. This might be where that octopus monster in a stone corridor is. Follow the straight path through the cave. Do not stray from it. Soon you will emerge from the hills and see Tahou before your eyes. Godspeed. And with that farewell wish, the hermit hobbles away, eager to return to his hut and devour the fresh food you have given him. The roof of the cave and the tunnel beyond is high enough for you to ride through it on horseback, but the interior is pitch black, and if you are not to stray off course, you will need some form of light to illuminate the way ahead. We have the fire sphere of Calt. It is with the exception of the summer sword, it's probably the single best item in the entire series. Your light illuminates the tunnel ahead, and within a few minutes you have found your way through to a hillside exit that overlooks a tiny village called Varta, perched on the edge of the Tahou Flats. If your source of light is a torch, remember to erase it from your action chart. It's not. We just close the fire sphere again, and its flames are once more contained. The flats comprise fields of cultivated crops that form a fertile market garden 2 miles wide. They are farmed right up to the banks of the great moat that encircles the capital. Varta is deserted. Its male inhabitants now shelter within the city walls, whilst the women and children have long since travelled south to the safety of Navasari. As you ride through the empty village and descend onto the flats, you catch your first awe-inspiring of the ancient city itself. Turn to section 100, a nice round number, that will probably feature at the beginning of the next episode. So, I'm going to end this one here. I hope you've all enjoyed this episode, somewhat rambling and divergent though it may have been, and I'll look forward to seeing you all in the next one. I'll say goodbye for now, and cheerio everyone. See you all soon.